So welcome to the channel, which is first and foremost a way to share with you the most compelling period pieces that I encounter. But today we're going to do a brief orientation video about provincial furniture, which will serve as an umbrella over the specific piece-by-piece videos to come, but it will also share with you a panel of various provincial masterpieces from different regions across France. And now the key here will be really to refine this vague term provincial, because it just designates all furniture made outside of Paris, in the provinces, across a 350-year timeline in the traditional decorative arts, from the Renaissance to the year 1840. And so you'll see why the French language uses far more specific terminology and subcategories underneath the overarching term provincial furniture to help orient collectors to the best examples of it. So here you'll see that there's a lot more to some provincial pieces than that which is charming but fundamentally clumsy and rustic. And we generally think of France when we think of provincial furniture, not only because this country was so important when furniture was being made at the height of its art, but because this country has so many different culturally distinct regions which left very special marks on furniture history. And so provincial first differentiates this iconic Parisian furniture from all other furniture made everywhere else outside of the capital of varying levels of refinement. But really the repertoire of truly fine provincial furniture presents some of the best furniture ever made. In the sense especially that even though these provincial masterpieces aren't as complicated as the finest veneered Parisian pieces, they present a certain intimacy of true furniture that luxury Parisian pieces lose by being so refined that the majority of their purpose from the beginning was to be art. And we see this because the luxury Parisian pieces which have earned their front row seat in art history are derivatives of official state furniture, which of course wasn't very domestic to begin with. It was meant to express the grandeur and the stability of the state. And so provincial masterpieces retain this domestic balance, but we see that there's really nothing rustic about them, although they tend to be in solid wood, like this circa 1780 piece behind me. And they showcase the triumph of the sculptor, and not the Parisian veneer artist. So when we pan our vision across them, we'll see these charming irregularities that are left by the hand of the maker hundreds of years ago. And so we're already talking about provincial pieces here that have a very high artistic value. Because most purely utilitarian country pieces from 200 to 300 years ago have not survived today. And so what we're really choosing from was never really country furniture to begin with. It was far more memorable. And it was what the French refer to as regional pieces, produced by sought-after workshops in a large city or a major town of a given region. So the term regional furniture or mobilier régional helps us refine the term provincial into that which was artistic enough from the beginning and that which is artistic enough now to really represent the bygone arts of a given region. And that's what we really want to focus on as collectors among all that is provincial and among all the different periods. We're looking for regional masterpieces. Now these pieces are technically provincial, but they rival in stylistic excellence, quality of execution, and rarity the more iconic pieces of Parisian furniture that have long since secured a front row seat in art history. So let's take a look at the different regions from which we might expect to find a regional masterpiece along that traditional timeline of about the year 1500 to 1840, and we can begin with the southwestern French region of Périgord and go directly to the Château de Montbazillac. Now this historic monument now houses a collection of furniture which is representative of the Périgord region. Now this armoire is technically something that falls under the umbrella of provincial, but it's a regional masterpiece classified a French historic monument, and it's emblematic of this region's art of furniture right around the year 1700. And here are some other equivalent ones in private collections published in the 1970s. Now, luckily for us, there is an equivalent one which is much closer that we can take a look at. We first see how this piece showcases not only the imposing Louis XIV style here around the year 1700, but we see that it has qualities unique to this southwestern French region, namely the enormous feet, sometimes referred to as cheese wheel feet, and the particularly imposing top cornice, which deploys upward in a complicated series of moldings. Now there's also an old label on the drawer, an antique dealer's label, but we can still read the word antiquaire. And So the age of this label shows us how this piece has been appreciated and traded as a real venerable piece of the past for longer than most pieces, most antiques have been around. And so with a piece like this, we really see it's the result of a master furniture maker who devoted his life to being able to build such a harmonious creation out of the materials of nature in a time before electricity and running water, and to bring it all together out of nearly 300 pieces of wood, expertly measured and finished, which I actually tried to count. And so, the ambiguity of the word provincial could cause a new collector to overlook something as masterful as this by thinking that it's some sort of country creation, when in fact we see that it's a regional masterpiece. And so now, if we go back in time to about the year 1650, we will see another slightly smaller regional masterpiece from the same region. This time a two-tiered, two-door presentation cabinet, which is in walnut from the forest that this region is known for. Now, this is sometimes referred to as a standing man because the legend has it that people hid inside of these during the French Revolution. You probably would have had to remove the drawer boards, and who knows if that's true. But we do see that the cornice is sort of in the shape of a hat. It appears to have a belt, and we see those cheese wheel-sized feet once again. But the geometric decor of diamond points here and the profound moldings and this very liberal use of now patinaed walnut is what lends this piece its artistic value. But again, we see the work of a master furniture maker who devoted his life to creating something so improbable out of the materials of nature. Now that we're on a roll, let's go back another 100 years to the city of Lyon, and funnily enough, the furniture is getting smaller, as furniture is really the expression of permanence and stability in a society. So the smaller it gets, the closer back we get to the Middle Ages, when furniture was smaller and portable, reflecting kind of a transient and unstable way of life. But here we really have an emblematic trace of Lyon's famous Renaissance period furniture production. Now, Renaissance just means rebirth, and it's a term coined by historian Jules Michelet in the 19th century for this period, which begins in Italy in the 1400s, when the world is emerging from the Dark Ages. And humanity sees a rapid shift intellectually, in the arts, technically, and we go from medieval caricatures to the statue of David. During the French Renaissance, Lyon was a very important place because it was located in the middle of a crucial trade route between the Mediterranean Sea and the capital city, Paris. And so now this two-tiered, four-doored armoire in walnut, oak was the prime wood of Gothic furniture 100 years earlier. It is in solid wood, but the technique of veneering later associated with these non-provincial Parisian pieces, this technique did not exist yet. So what we're looking at here really is an exceptional 16th century artifact with a bewildering decor that's inspired by the resurgence and interest in ancient Roman art, and notably this frieze of tear-shaped gadroons between the two doors, the motif sculpted around the caricatured faces on the doors, sometimes referred to as being done in the manner of embossed leather. And so when people use the word provincial, they're probably not confusing Renaissance artifacts with country furniture, but technically this Lyonnaise armoire would fall under the umbrella of provincial. But here again, it's actually even hard to qualify this as a regional masterpiece because during the Renaissance period, Lyon wasn't an extraneous region, it was in fact a center of the arts. And so this is a Renaissance piece from the Lyonnaise school, and most recently it came from a dilapidated manor in Burgundy. It was full of mold and old wine labels, and then part of a nest of an edible dormouse, which is called edible because the Romans used to eat them. But anyway, now let's take a trip to the northern port city of Dunkirk to the year 1750, and also to the back office where we have a very interesting trace of this port city's fine furniture production. So we first notice that this piece is in red mahogany, which the port cities were famous for using because this exotic wood would arrive into France via the ports. And now port furniture designates a very special type of provincial furniture made in different ports from the 17th to the early 19th centuries. And the port makers are also known for having been more sophisticated than their inland counterparts, simply because they lived in a port and they had access to travel and new ideas, while also working for a very cosmopolitan and wealthy clientele, which of course had amassed their wealth through commerce in the ports. And this piece really showcases the dexterity of its maker, with these astonishing curves, a diminished top tier, and then doors which ripple upward to the peak of kind of an undulating cornice, making the piece really appear to soar upwards. And this style of cornice is also found on Dutch furniture, revealing Dunkirk's proximity to Holland. And now for collectors today, it should be mentioned that this dense mahogany really resists insect attack, and that's part of why it traverses time particularly well. So the most celebrated port for 18th century furniture is the port of Bordeaux on the Atlantic coast. And again, we see something that could technically be called provincial, but we really can't classify the solid mahogany pieces made for the chateau and the city mansions of this major port as country furniture. This presentation armoire from the 1780s is also in mahogany, and it reminds us why the metalwork on Bordelaise pieces is as memorable as the pieces themselves. It also shows how the people in the 18th century knew these items were exceptional, and they were the object of great pride from both makers and customers. And then finally, we see here inside that the doors have been finished, and we notice the holes left by the candelabra that used to be mounted here. I'm getting tired of all this travel, but let's go back 80 years, again to the year 1700, up to Normandy, where we can see a two-tiered, four-doored presentation cabinet in oak. The band of sculpture across the top here was inspired by ornamental manuals of the day, and it's particularly successful. But again, instead of being a country piece, this is from a large, sought-after workshop in Normandy, and there's a real refinement to this, inside and out. A certain perfection in its execution relative to that which we might expect on a so-called country piece. Now, this piece was actually likely made by the same workshop that made the one conserved in the Museum of Norman Arts and History, the Château de Martinville. This museum example here is published, and we can see that it's conserved by the museum as a real trace of the heights of the art of Normandy around the year 1700. And in conclusion, while we're in Normandy around the year 1700, let's take a look at something which can be categorized as honestly provincial, from a small and forgotten workshop. So collectors are drawn to any type of piece for its overarching success as a work of art, which we evaluate based on how that piece stands out among others of its class. And so if we look closely at this startling decor, these pieces reveal themselves to have been made at the hand of a small town maker. The irregularities here are more pronounced than anything we've seen on regional masterpieces, but it's this rustic quality of execution coupled with such a sophisticated decor that makes these pieces all the more astounding and improbable. And perhaps more collectible than the regional masterpieces, which the English language seems to group with country furniture like this. And so in the context of how this set was somehow not separated, we also appreciate the fact that this was a one-of-a-kind commission to celebrate a wedding. We see celebratory starbursts, sculpted hearts, and flowers, and this was an order that was no doubt very unusual from the beginning, and which must have stretched the creative potential of this small-town workshop, the traces of which, outside these two pieces, are likely all but gone. But finally, we see a true example of provincial, honest country furniture, which ends up being just as compelling as the repertoire of Parisian pieces, which are so recognized by collectors. And even if one doesn't relate to country life today, 90% of the population back then was rural, so pieces like this are a more poignant trace of the reality of life in France around the year 1700. And now they forever commemorate the love of a young couple whose names are forgotten. And so I hope that you've enjoyed this panel of pieces and my incomplete commentary on Provincial, as really the goal here is just to share the pieces with you and to preserve a digital trace of them online. And now, if Provincial struck you as something a little clumsy, I hope that you can see how this category actually comprises a host of regional masterpieces which are not rustic at all. And it also includes very special port furniture and even some Renaissance period artifacts. And finally, if you've always been drawn to simply provincial, solid wood, comfortable pieces from the past, I think you can rest assured that your favorite category here is not only extremely diverse, but imbued with a real depth of beauty.